We are talking Mike Sullivan, Vladislav Gavrikov, Chris Kreider, and more on a very special crossover edition with Broadway Block podcast. Plus, we all discuss whether the Rangers will make the playoffs this season.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1373 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, yeah, very special crossover edition here. Going to be joined again by Joey and Stevie from Broadway Block podcast. If you haven't had a chance to catch their Rangers podcast as of yet, I definitely recommend doing so. They do a phenomenal job, and it's always a pleasure talking all things Rangers with Joey and Stevie. So, yeah, let's go ahead and play our interview with Joey and Stevie from Broadway Block. Enjoy. All right, and so with no further ado, let's go ahead and welcome in our very special guest for today from the Broadway Block podcast. We've got Steve, we've got Joe. Fellas, first of all, thanks for joining the show. It's always good, doing these crossovers and joining each other's podcasts. And we're in sort of the quiet parts of the off season, but you know what? There is Ranger hockey this month. The calendar turned to September and preseason hockey, but still Ranger hockey. How are you guys feeling? Like, I know last year was rough, but are you ready for Ranger hockey? Are you ready to turn the page? Just kind of let me know and let everybody know how you're feeling.
I went up and down all summer long where I was a little bit mad, and then I'd be like, something would happen, and it'd make me feel a little better. And then I think after the Kreider trade, I wasn't too upset about it because I felt like it needed to happen. But then all good things from Chris Drury once we got Gavrikov, got rid of Kreider Miller, even was able to squeak in Scott Morrow. I enjoyed getting Mike Sullivan. I think he's going to bring some discipline that the New York Rangers need and get that drama out of the locker room. So now that it's September, I'm all positivity. I think this team is going to go further than people expect. I think they are going to make the playoffs, so I'm pumped for Rangers hockey.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. Like, it's hard to look at the offseason that the Rangers have had and look at it from a negative lens. I know a lot of people liked Kreider, but I was pretty vocal on social media that I thought we should get rid of him and remove ourselves from any opportunity to sign him to a long contract that just blows up in our face. And I think Drury got great value to it, like Joe just alluded to. And on the last episode of the Broadway Block, we were just talking about kind of the Metropolitan in general. It doesn't really seem like a lot of teams around us got very much better. And I'm anxiously looking forward to see how it starts because all positivity, but, waiting for that other shoe to drop that gives us reason for pause,
Yeah, absolutely. And you both touched on the Kreider Miller trade, which is interesting. We might as well just jump right to that right now. So, throughout the offseason, we could kind of see the writing on the wall where it's a pretty good chance, not a guarantee, but a pretty good chance that Kreider Miller was going to be traded. And I was saying on my show, I don't know how you guys felt about this, but I was saying that I think you can get a first rounder for Kreider Miller. And some people agreed, some people laughed at that idea. They get a first, a second, and a pretty good prospect in Scott Morrow. That return blew my mind. And like both of you, I think that I had kind of soured on Kreider Miller after being very high on him his first couple of seasons in the league. So just your thoughts on that trade and specifically, the return that the Rangers got for Kreider Miller.
I feel like we got a great return. Obviously, some of the other trades we saw, everybody wanted more out of the Chris Kreider deal. But for somebody that made our Vezina winning goaltender look bad last year with a lot of giveaways and everything, and his stock really fall after having such a high ceiling and coming into the league and looking like a goal-scoring defenseman that could hit and take control of the game and then just kind of plateauing and only going down from there. You knew someone was going to pay him based on his age and his upside, that what you saw from Kreider those first 2.5, 3 years. But after that, I just feel like we could not pay him the money, and you knew he was due a long-term contract. I didn't think we were going to get a first, second, and a pretty good prospect that could crack the lineup with Scott Morrow, but I'm thrilled with the return. I like where the defense is headed. Obviously, we'll probably touch on the Gavrikov signing, which because of the Keandre Miller not paying him, I felt like we were able to get somebody, maybe the best free agent defenseman, probably is the best free agent defenseman of this summer. So for me, we had to revamp the defense to help Igor out, and I don't know why the Drury haters are always just so mad.
Yeah, man, I agree with Joe, everything he's just said about the return. I don't know if I was as optimistic as you, John, thinking that a first round would have materialized. And even if the trade read like a first and Scott Morrow, I think that's still a really great return. But you watch that video that came out from the Canes with the GM in the room, and he got this feeling like if I don't include a second rounder that Drury's just going to say no. So I'm really glad that it seemed like there was that market for him. And even if it wasn't quite the return that we got, even if it was 2 seconds in a Morrow, I think it's still fine. Keandre to me represents investing in another guy because of his potential, and the Rangers have this like kind of guilty like pleasure in seeking this massive payday for someone who just hasn't yet proven it. And I think Rangers fans tend to fall in love with potential. And to me, I agree again with Joe that, which is funny because on our show we don't really agree a lot, but so far we're completely batting 1,000. But I just feel like what he did defensively never made up for the contributions, and the giveaways, the amount of times where it would go directly to somebody's stick and then right into the back of the net. I mean, these weren't just like giveaways that kept us pinned in the zone. They were really costly. And to me, switching defensive styles, playing more of a man-on-man style, you would think would play into his skill sets with like his reach and his speed, but it just never seemed to. And in a zone structure, I was optimistic that once we got Sullivan, maybe there could be a rebound season, but probably best to get rid of him. Will he be a better player in the Canes? Probably. They have this great system, this great defensive structure that I don't think the Rangers really have at the moment, and until the puck drops and I'm proved wrong. But it just seems like he'll prosper there, but it won't be one of those situations where we look back and think like, gee, what could have been? Because I think we all know what would have happened should he have stayed on the Rangers.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, one of the points that I've made is like, well, there is that danger now. And I think some people, myself included, have at least some apprehension about him staying in the division and, this could burn the Rangers, right? But the thing is, like, he's being paid like he's a star. So even if he plays like a star, like, it's really just kind of fair market value. And if he doesn't, then the Rangers are going to be laughing all the way to the bank because they did stock up on these assets and they did get a pretty good prospect in Scott Morrow. So definitely an interesting dynamic there. Something else, I think, Joey, you touched on this just for a second. The Chris Kreider trade. I mean, we have to talk about this. The dude has been a Ranger for a decade and a half. All these big time clutch moments, especially in the playoffs. And obviously this past season didn't really go his way, didn't really go anybody's way on the New York Rangers. But, he gets traded. And of course I have mixed feelings about it, even though the writing was kind of on the wall. But to me, it was one of those things. It's just kind of a necessary evil of the world of professional sports. So I'll toss it to you guys, man. What was your take on Kreider? Like, do you wish he could still be here, or were you guys ready to move on?
Well, I was kind of ready to move on because he has been the main focus of our power play for a long time. And ever since that 50-goal season, the production has been down. Remember, if Chris Kreider didn't hit that 50-goal season, I think we would all be similar to the Keandre, asking for him to get out of New York a little faster, because we, at that time when they gave him that 7-year deal, we thought it was going to be a bad deal. I remember me and Steve even talking about it, be like, I don't know about that for Chris Kreider. And I felt like he fulfilled most of his deal, but these last couple seasons of Chris Kreider playing injured, we found out that he had vertigo, and then he's playing in different exhibition games and really pushing himself along. And, the Wolverine hand after the season getting surgery, where it's like, the Rangers finally have had some depth ever since the rebuild, where it's like maybe we could have shuffled someone else into that position. And I felt like he really hurt us going down the line by just trying to stay in the lineup, and it just kind of became like stale air. I love Chris Kreider. I still remember his first playoff game coming in. I thought he would retire as a New York Ranger, but just too much smoke came over him and not enough production. And when we needed him on the power play, it was just the same old Chris Kreider Swiss Army knife that everyone had figured out. So for me, it seemed like a no-brainer. Obviously, I love Kreider. I didn't want to see him go, but hockey's a business, and then they'll be the first people calling for Drury's head if we don't make the playoffs, and we played Chris Kreider all year again. So for me, it was a must trade this summer.
I think I feel very similarly as far as like the emotional attachment, and obviously it's never easy to say goodbye to players. Like, we just posted about Zuccarello. It's been almost 8 years since that happened, and I think there's names that I think will always be household names for Rangers fans. And Kreider, I mean, like we were talking a couple weeks ago, like if you're the guy in charge of making the montage for when the Ducks play the Rangers at MSG, it's not a hard task. Like there are so many easy moments to find from Kreider, and how many moments that we like leapt out of our chairs for him. And the guy will always be a Ranger great in my opinion. But I think it also stands to a point of like guys like Henrik Lundqvist, like it doesn't grow on trees to be a Ranger for life. It is a really difficult task. And I almost agree with Joe in every sense. Like I feel like we could have moved on from him sooner. And I think maybe the return, because we just talked about the Kreider trade, and I think the return for Kreider is a little bit less than what people wanted, especially the emotional toll that was involved in getting rid of a guy that everybody kind of grew up watching. And I mean, again, after the contract, Joe made a great point. I don't think any of us thought he would really live up to it. I think we saw probably his best as a Ranger, and it wouldn't surprise me if he had a good season with the Ducks, but I still don't think that would have happened if he would remain a Ranger.
Yeah, I agree. And with the Ducks, I mean, as far as like a Western Conference team, I could pull for them a little bit because that's basically becoming Rangers West at this point. I think they're up to, 4 former Rangers on that team, most notably, of course, being Chris Kreider. But yeah, it's a tough situation, but I think we're all kind of in agreement that it's probably something that, pretty much had to happen this offseason. Now, there is another Ranger star player, longtime player on the New York Rangers, who kind of has an uncertain future, and that's Artemi Panarin. And there were certain fans that were talking about maybe trading him this offseason, which never really made sense to me because the Rangers were looking to reload and basically retool as opposed to do a full-fledged rebuild. If the Rangers have another rough season and they're out of the playoffs and it gets to the trade deadline, then maybe you explore it if Panarin's willing to, waive his no-move clause. But for me, I mean, I want him here for the rest of the season, and I figure the offseason is when you kind of cross that bridge. I mean, I wouldn't want the Rangers to re-sign Panarin where it prevents them from getting one of the big fish in next year's, free agent pond, whether it's McDavid or Kempe or Kaprizov. But I mean, just your guys' thoughts on Panarin. What do you expect from him this season? And will he be a Ranger past this season? Do you want him to be a Ranger past this upcoming season?
I think me and Steve, this is a point where we disagree on.
Here we go.
I love Brad, and I think he's done great things, and I would like him to stay a Ranger if it's possible in the salary cap. I just feel like these Russians that he's going to go after as much money as he can, where exactly to your point, John, I want to get 2 big free agent fishes we've talked about on our show. And if we got rid of Panarin's salary, then we could definitely go after 2 of this great 2026 free agency class. He's led the Rangers in points multiple seasons. He passed Rod Jobert's point streak. Like, the man has done so much. We remember the Game 7 winner in New York against the Penguins. So for me, I love him, but the playoff production has been a little low. So it's kind of like if you could shuffle Panarin out at the trade deadline, if you had to, because maybe we could get someone on his level or he's showing signs that he's going to walk, then you got to do it because that's a business move. But if he's willing to restructure after, going to free agency and take more of a team-friendly deal, I'd love to have him. Like, he's a great personality in the locker room. We talked about what Ryan Reeves said, that he would just come over and play basketball and drink vodka with him after the game, super late night. Like, that's the type of person you want. He's still on a flip phone. Like, he's a big personality, and his production has been there, not in the playoffs, but maybe we need someone, 2 other stronger people than Panarin, and if he's willing to take a backseat and a lower contract, I'd love to have him.
Okay, I don't think he remains a Ranger past this season for a lot of reasons. Like Joe touched on with the upcoming free agency class, you mentioned it, of course, that there's a huge, I think, gift falling in your lap with the salary cap increasing the same year that your biggest contract, minus Igor, is set to fall off the books. So I think that Drury has to be keenly aware of this. It's not like this is news to him that this is a potential situation where you get 20 million in relief before you even factor in guys like, you're a laugh trade away from having $30 million to spend, which if these names that we're mentioning do make it to free agency, and McDavid just had I think an eerily eye-opening interview talking about, what do you think about re-signing? And his answer was, I have every intention to win in Edmonton. Doesn't mention re-signing whatsoever. His intention is to win in Edmonton. And I think the conversation with McDavid specifically is like, if he wins the cup this upcoming season, I think you can feel good about walking away like, hey, I committed to you guys. I signed here. I brought you a cup. I have to go somewhere else. And if he doesn't, I think the conversation's even easier. Hey, listen, I've tried. We went to 2 finals. Maybe it's 3 after this season. And we never were able to get it done. So I got to go win a cup. So I think that conversation should absolutely impact whether or not Artemi remains on the team. He has not been extended up till this point in the season, which should tell you that we're probably entering into the year without an extension in place. I think even if it was a 7, what would be team friendly? 7.5, 8. I mean, like the number,
ballpark, about
that. The number could be lower, but what does that save you? $3 million for a player that's more than likely again in the conversation of we've probably seen the best from him. Now, there's a lot of different points you can make about Panarin. He's relatively always been healthy. He hasn't missed a period of games in a really long time. He entered the NHL later in his career, so he doesn't have the same wear and tear as your typical 18-year-old that walked into the league and got battered for 8 seasons. So I think there's a lot of upside, but I don't know how gray you want to get on this episode. There's been a lot of things that have come out over the last few years about extracurricular things that have nothing to do with hockey and doesn't seem to impact a player's ability to get another contract somewhere else. But it's all like this kind of like murky air that's surrounded this Rangers team for the last 3 or 4 seasons now, that I think in a way it's a blessing in disguise that this contract is ending and you can just kind of just wash your hands of it and not be attached to this player any longer. Even though, all that said, he's been a fantastic Ranger. Talk about the moments he's had, overtime winners, fantastic games that we've seen from Artemi Panarin, and stats that we haven't seen from any player before him ever. Maybe one of the best free agency signings in NHL history, not just in Rangers history. But I do think that the time has come, and fortunately for us, if he leaves, it opens up a wealth of opportunity that wouldn't exist if it was 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, no, I think that all makes sense. I'm very much in wait and see mode as it pertains to Artemi Panarin. We'll see how everything goes this year and if he can be had at a discount. And, some of those free agents we were just talking about, I mean, they could re-sign with their teams between now and then. And Panarin almost becomes like, the backup option to signing one of those big names. But we'll see how it all goes. In just a minute, we're going to keep everything rolling here. We're going to talk a little bit about the hiring of Mike Sullivan, the big free agency signing Vladislav Gavrikov, and some other new faces in town with the New York Rangers. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people cannot name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off of your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, so talking here with Stevie and Joey from Broadway Block podcast. And fellas, I figure we'll shift our attention now a little bit to some of the newer faces in town with the New York Rangers. And we got to start with Mike Sullivan. The writing was sort of on the wall with how bad this past season went and the team missing the playoffs and everything, that Peter Laviolette was going to be very soon the Rangers ex-coach. And of course that did happen. And then it kind of begs this question, like, do you try somebody new who hasn't really gotten an opportunity in the NHL yet? Or do you kind of go the retread route? And that's sort of what they did with Mike Sullivan. I mean, he's not as much of a retread as some other coaches that have coached for 6, 7, 8 different teams. But, he's been around for a while. It's sort of the play it safe pick. I still think among all the former NHL coaches that were available that he was probably the best option. But just your thoughts on Sullivan. Like, you were on board with this or you're not really feeling it?
I was on board with it because I think it needed to happen. We know the stories came out about Peter Laviolette not being that vocal, not even going into the locker room, where Mike Sullivan's pedigree, he demands the best from people, where I feel like he's going to pull a player aside in the locker room and be like, dude, you got to do this. You got to try this. And he might sit somebody if they have to. I feel like he's that type of coach. My only skepticism is, there's no Sidney Crosby here. So what can he do after the fact? Obviously, we had Dan, it's a little weird. We switched coaches with the Penguins almost, having Dan Muse in-house and then him going to the Penguins and us not even considering that and going for Mike Sullivan. But where this Rangers team is and hearing how much drama was in the locker rooms, I feel like you needed to bring in an established head coach at this time, not like a first-time guy. So I was happy with the pick. We had Linda Cohn on our show, and we all agreed that you don't want to be the person, you don't want to be the head coach in New York City, and you don't want to be the GM in New York City. So I'm just happy that I feel like we got the guy, the best available, similar to a Gavrikov, that he's the best available. We got him, we locked him in, and we're really committed to him with 5-year contract.
I think it does kind of speak to the testimony of being a Rangers fan, because there were people upset how much money we gave Sullivan. It doesn't count against the cap.
It doesn't matter, yeah.
You should flex that as an organization. That comes with the territory of playing in New York, is that sometimes things end up in your favor. And there's the Chris Drury connection with Sullivan. And then obviously he brings in David Quinn, which I think I would agree with Joe on every point about Sullivan. And I think people were oddly okay with the David Quinn thing, where I heard people kind of pushing back on Sullivan being the coach. So, I mean, for me, Sullivan is the no-brainer. Quinn was kind of the, okay, let's see how this happens. I mean, we've seen him have a weird tenure as a New York Rangers coach, and then he goes on to be a Shark and gets fired from that, and most recently an assistant with the Penguins. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if maybe that's more of a role that's David Quinn suited for. Sullivan, I think, to Joe's point, he brings a level of accountability that the Rangers just frankly haven't had. And I think that Joe and I have coached for a long time outside of what we do for the podcast. And I know that every person needs a different flavor as a coach. And that's really a weird place to be in when you start to get good at coaching people, is you kind of use the same strategy for everybody, but it really doesn't work. And I think that this room, the notion is that they're kind of soft and that they don't take kindly to that constructive feedback. And in a weird way, it's like Lord of the Flies. We kind of we don't have a captain right now, so we need the accountability more than ever. You can't let the room run itself, because it's just not going to work that way. And I think we can touch on the captain spot in a moment, but I'm excited for what Sullivan potentially could bring to this Rangers core, and in a very ambiguous spot where we don't know what the future is going to have. Next year is going to be a huge offseason. There's a lot of speculation of that the people think we're not going to make the playoffs. I am adamant that we will, and I don't think we would have had a realistic shot with Peter Laviolette behind the bench. It seems like historically, and obviously it's different faces in the locker room every year, but it seems like historically the team seems to do a lot better in that first year with a coach. Gerard Gallant, Lade Vigneault, Peter Laviolette, the list goes on as far as getting that bump from a new voice. And I do think that the roster is more talented on paper than anyone's willing to give us credit for. So hopefully, I mean, we're all rooting for some success from the Rangers, but I just don't see a world where they don't make the playoffs. And I don't see that being a possibility without Sullivan behind the bench.
Absolutely. And the other big face, and we've kind of mentioned him a couple of times off and on, throughout the episode already, but Vladislav Gavrikov, he is somebody that, Joey, I think you mentioned it, that he was maybe the best free agent defenseman that was available. And I'll be honest, man, when I saw the contract that Provorov got, I think it was for $8.5 million per season or something along those lines. And I was really worried that the Rangers were going to really overdo it. And just give Gavrikov an insane contract. It's not a small contract, 7 years at $7 million, but I think it's reasonable. And, the thing about Gavrikov, where I kind of warmed up to him a little bit, is it just feels like he's very steady and very consistent. And when you watch these Ranger defensemen last season, they were anything but that. So somebody who's almost like just so consistent that it almost is a little bit boring actually sounds kind of nice to me. But I'll get your guys' thoughts on that as well. What are you guys feeling about Gavrikov?
Well, John, I agree with you. It wasn't like a flashy signing where you're like, oh, Gavrikov, like I'm super excited. But then when you think about what the Rangers needed as the 28th ranked defense and your number one defenseman with an ever-changing pairing partner and losing Ryan Lindgren, some consistency would do him well, take some pressure off him and let him be Adam Fox for a while. I think that is the best part about the signing of Gavrikov is that you shore up that other defenseman on that first line, and it allows Adam Fox to kind of relax because we saw his game fall back. We are now hearing about Adam Fox haters. You're on Twitter, you see it. So shoring up that first line is what was needed for sure. 28th ranked defense, it's only upside. My only negative about Gavrikov is obviously the length of the contract, but him being 29 years old, and giving that length of contract seems like it never works out into our favor when Rangers get up into the 30s. And especially the way he plays defense, he's a little more physical, but he's an elite shutdown defenseman. So that worries me on year 3 or 4, but we see if Chris Drury's still around at that time, what happens to people with long contracts. Somehow they still, like Jacob Trouba said, it's a rite of passage to get shipped out of New York. So for me, I was thrilled with it, just a little weary on the length of the contract.
Yeah, I think something we've talked about a few times on our show is that I think if you're Drury, you can't necessarily be worried about year 4 and 5 right now. Like I don't think his job is up for grabs by any means, but I do think that you have to be more worried about the impact right away. And Gavrikov not only brings this like layer of consistency, but to Joe's point about Adam Fox, it seems like the natural fit to put him there. And I can think of at least 5 players off the top of my head where when we get them, we're excited. Even getting Lafreniere or getting Panarin, for example, but they still don't play in their natural position or on our top spot where they would have on any other team. So there's this like layer of inconsistency whenever you bring in a guy that you think would be perfect for this role, and then they're kind of like buried on this role that doesn't fit them. And right now with the Rangers, like Joe said, I think that was the immediate hole that needed to be filled. And yeah, I think it's a big contract, but it was rumored that he was looking for more than that. So I think Rangers fans initially were excited about getting kind of like a discount for this guy. And it also, I think, takes away a little bit of this worry because another narrative that I'm sure you've seen as well is that no one wants to be here after all of the Trouba drama and the Goodrow thing. And I think that takes a little bit of a bullet out of the chamber there where guys clearly see this as a destination still. And I think it also speaks to the layer that we view this from versus the way that the players view this from is that New York should still be a coveted destination. And I mean, before last season started, we were a favorite to win it all. And in 82 short games, it looks like we're starting from scratch again. So, I mean, I would caution fans to be negative on a guy like Gavrikov. And to Joe's point, I don't think he's going to blow you away with his flashiness. But if you watched enough hockey games to see somebody make an impact on the ice, I think that it won't take you very long to start appreciating a guy like Gavrikov.
You talked about how New York, the Rangers, it's still a destination. This is still a team that people want to come play for, despite, everything that went on with Trouba this past offseason. And one kind of example of that, I would say, is JT Miller, because obviously he was traded to the Rangers mid-season this past year, but he had the full no-move clause. He pretty much held all the cards and basically forced his way to the Rangers. I don't know if it's quite that cut and dry, but that's where he wanted to go. And I feel like the Canucks had to work within those parameters. But JT Miller, it's kind of a situation. What's old is new again. He's kind of a new face back in town with the New York Rangers for his second stint. And one thing that I've been big on this entire offseason is I really want the Rangers to keep Mika Zibanejad with JT Miller. I realize that does leave you a little bit of a hole at third line center, which would probably be filled by either Brodzinski or Parsonen. But Mika played a heck of a lot better last season once JT Miller came over. You can go by the stats or any kind of eye test. Wasn't perfect, but it was a heck of a lot better. So just your thoughts. Would you want Mika to stay with JT Miller, or do you want Mika centering his own line?
Well, I kind of said it on our show that I'm okay wherever Mika goes. Obviously, his production has been down. I've been hard on Mika the last 3 years because I feel like everyone just kind of cracks it up to, well, he's in a slump, but the slumps seem to be getting longer and longer and longer. So JT definitely brought out better play for Mika, but my only concern is that going to go forward if he's consistently playing on that right wing? I liked to touch back on the Mike Sullivan point. When Mike Sullivan got hired, he reached out to Mika right away and kind of asked him, like, where are you comfortable playing? Do you want to continue right wing or center? And he kind of was like, wherever I fit, wherever you need me, which is like, I feel like old Mika's advantage ad would have been like, I want to play center. This is my spot. I need to be on the top two lines. And to hear that he was more open to that, I think you go into camp with Mika on the right, and if he looks like, then you go back to maybe third line center, second center, and throw Trocheck down. We've talked about tons and tons of line combinations, but the fact that we have 3 glorified centers there is great for us. But I'm okay if he starts out on the right, but I really think it's up to Sullivan and seeing how he goes forward in camp.
I think recently there was an interview with Sullivan that was really telling by Dan Rosen of NHL.com, and he was talking to Sullivan about what he expects to see and all this stuff. And to just give you the highlight reel, he basically said, I'm going to look hard at Miller, Mika, and I think that Cooley deserves a shot in the top 6 and to play on their line. And I think if you look within the Rangers team as far as guys that could play a net front role and fill the gap that Kreider had, it's obviously no secret that Cooley had a fantastic season last year. In addition to another crazy stat, if you don't mind for a second, Miller, I was looking into his numbers and is ranked 12th in scoring in the last 5 years, which is crazy. He has 1 less point than Matthew Tkachuk over that 5-year span. And within the top 25 players in the league in scoring, he has the most hits of anybody, 300 more than Matthew Tkachuk. So I think Miller might quietly be one of the most underrated players in the league. And I think playing him with one of your guys that you want to not only improve on, but get back to that form that we saw Mika. And I mean, it doesn't take long to find goals for Mika from a few seasons ago where he just had all the confidence on the planet. And to Joe's point, his hot streaks were always like white hot, and then his cold streaks were always like frozen. And playing with Miller and a guy like Cooley, who can be kind of physical where you don't have to be, and you can be the player on that line that is basically all gas and offense. And Mika's obviously a two-way player that has also slumped in the defensive categories as well. I think that would give him the best potential to not only make an impact positively for the Rangers, but find that confidence where he could carry that throughout other lines, because being healthy is a very temporary state. And right now, going into the season, a lot of people have had rest and surgeries like Berard and Schneider, and it'll give you all this opportunity to hit the ground running. But once something happens where the lineup has to be juggled, you would much rather Mika to be in this really good spot where you could have him shouldering the top line or centering your second line or centering the first line, depending on what happens. So I think it's going to be imperative to get him off to the best start possible. And I think the only way to do that is skating him next to Miller and kind of continuing that consistency that we saw towards the end of the year. Because you brought up how Mika was a better player after the Miller signing, or after the trade rather, but you can extend that conversation to Trocheck, who was over a point per game player since February 1st. Panarin was over a point per game player. Mika, I mean, these guys all turned up as soon as Miller showed up. Obviously, it wasn't enough to get us into the playoffs, but I think a lot of our success is going to live and die by Mika and Miller having the same level of chemistry that they did towards the end of last season.
Absolutely. And I think JT Miller is somebody that, at the very least, is in the mix to be the next New York Ranger captain, but we're going to discuss that in just a second. All the different candidates, we'll make our picks. We'll decide even if the Rangers are going to have a captain into this upcoming season, because we don't know that either. But we're going to do all that fun stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It is also quick and easy and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. FanDuel is the best because you can bet however you'd like to bet. There's player props, you can build a same-game parlay, or you can even jump in live as the action unfolds. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, fellas, it's been a pleasure as always. I figure we can wrap up with a couple more questions and a big discussion that's on the mind of a lot of Ranger fans. And that, of course, is the topic of who is going to be the next captain of this team. I've talked about this quite a bit, so I'll keep it brief and turn it over to you guys. My vote is for JT Miller. I could live with Vincent Trocheck too, but I feel like Miller, you brought him over here to change the culture a little bit, to change the style of play, to be somebody that's not afraid to get in your face a little bit, to shock the system, basically. And there is some risk involved with JT Miller because he's had some issues in different places that he's played. Trocheck might be the safer choice, but I'm ready for this team to do something bold. One Stanley Cup in 85 years will do that to you. So JT Miller is my top choice, followed by Trocheck. But the floor is yours, guys. Who's your next Ranger captain? And do you think they'll actually name one before opening night?
Well, John, I've said it on our show. I don't think they're going to name a captain. I think it's got to be proven this year. And we saw, like you guys said, Miller boosted the whole team. He definitely wanted to come here. But I think he's got to prove it this year. I think, to Steve's point earlier in the show, I think that's why you brought in Mike Sullivan to hold the accountability. And I don't think there's anybody ready to be captain. If there was, we talked about on our show, the Broadway Block, that there was 3 options. JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck, and we said Adam Fox. He's the only defenseman that carries a letter on his chest, and he's only getting older. So if there was going to be a defenseman, I think it would be Adam Fox. But if there was going to be named a captain, I have to go with Vincent Trocheck. I think he's in the middle of his contract, 7-year contract that he signed. He's definitely improved this Rangers team. Obviously, he had a down year after coming off a career year, but if you look at the Rangers last year, who didn't have a down year, where I feel like he exemplifies a leader by coming into the ice. He takes players under their wings and lets them live at their house. I said it on our show when he was out in Pittsburgh. He invited everybody over to his Nona's house to eat. So I think he's a leader on and off the ice. And to your point with JT, I think that he's definitely a leader and definitely demands respect. But I think, he has to prove it. And, that whole thing with Elias Peterson with the Canucks, I don't think did him any good in proving his case to be captain. So I think it's Vincent Trocheck, Stephen McDonald winner if there is a captain, which I don't think there is going to be a captain this year.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely in the same boat as you, John. I think it's Miller first. I think there's a world where we don't necessarily name a captain. And if it wasn't either of those 2 options, it's got to go to Trocheck. I think, so all the points that Joe just listed, there's a strong argument, I think, for Trocheck's leadership ability. He's also been here a great deal longer than Miller. But I think there was a few moments last season where there's a whistle or a power play meetup, and it's JT running the show. And I think that in a world where they do name a captain, I've always been adamant that it needs to be like a catalyst. There needs to be a level of, when I step over the boards, I'm going to make an impact and I'm going to show you all how we're supposed to carry ourselves. And I do think that there's the red flags as far as the maturity and the fact that he hasn't been on the squad for more than a handful of games. But I think weirder things have happened in the world of hockey, and naming a captain should be like an inside kind of moment, and looking at who you have and as terms of who's going to make the biggest impact towards doing this role. I don't think you're going to see a better season out of Trocheck by giving him the captain. And I don't think that you should feel comfortable with your captain maybe not being the player that is going to change the moment. I mean, more so like Fox would be an example of a game breaker, where a lot of these guys that we've had as Rangers captains are just game changers. No shade on McDonough, no shade on Ryan Callahan, and no shade on guys like Jacob Trouba, even, they're all game changers. When they step over the ice, there's a positive impact to be made. But I think there's very few players that you could look at over the last decade that can impact the game that JT Miller can, and in a way that will make everyone else kind of rise to the occasion. The same way that we're talking about all the stats that were padded based on JT Miller's arrival, I do think that if there's one player that, we're going into the final minutes of a game that I want to step over the boards, we've already talked about Artemi Panarin's uncertain future, and I think that Miller's contract, as well as being kind of at the prime of his career, again, he's a little bit older, but being a guy that, there's two players on the roster that have scored 100 points. It's Panarin and Miller. And if you're going to put all of your eggs into one basket, I think that Miller's upside is better than most players on this team, and I'm comfortable with the decision either way, but I think there's a much stronger case in Miller's favor than not naming a captain or naming it to Trocheck or Fox.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think with Miller and Trocheck, I think me and Stevie are kind of on Team Miller and Joey's on Team Trocheck over there, but I don't think any of us would hate either one of them.
I wouldn't mind either or.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'd both be a good choice. Now, another question I wanted to ask you guys, though, you've already kind of answered it. I was going to ask if you think the Rangers will make the playoffs this upcoming season. I believe you've both said yes. I believe they will as well. So I'll kind of alter the question. How do you think they stack up against the Metro? Because to me, the Metro honestly seems down a little bit. You've got teams like Philly and Pittsburgh that look pretty hapless right now. And, the Caps, they were unbelievable last year, but I think they're going to regress this upcoming season. Even the Canes, the Canes always go out of the playoffs in absolutely devastating fashion. And I just have this weird feeling that they might not get off the canvas the way they have in other years. I don't know how many times you can keep having just embarrassing, horrible playoff exits before it messes with you a little bit. But just your thoughts. I mean, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but how do you guys think the Rangers stack up against the Metro?
It's funny. That was our last week's episode. We were talking about how the Metro is not the gauntlet it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And you look at the moves around the Metropolitan, Capitals only made one move. I said, unpopular opinion, I think the Rangers and the Islanders had the best offseason, but I think the Islanders more are on prospects, getting rid of Lou, where it will take some time. To your point, I think with Dan Muse and Crosby getting older and nobody really knows what's going on in Pittsburgh, how long that show is going to last, of the Malkin-Crosby show, I think they're going to be at the bottom of the division. The only disagreeing point is I think Philly's going to be up a little bit higher than people expect because Tockett's a good coach where it has to be an up season for them. And I think that Trevor Zegras trade was good for them. They have some young people over there. Tippett. I'm not that down on the Flyers where I think they could surprise people, but the Canes going out in disappointing fashion, I feel like it would be the most Canes thing to do to not even make the playoffs, and maybe Brendan Moore is on the way out of there. And I look at the Devils, they didn't do too many moves. I feel like they're just trying to load up to get the 3 Hughes brothers, and I'm still down on their goaltending where I think they lost some key defensive pieces, and you just don't know Jack Hughes' health, and they're so dependent on his play where I think the division is pretty open, and I think the Rangers could capitalize on that. And I even said on our show that I think they could finish second.
So I'm going to sound like a bit of a homer. So if you're not into that, it was a good listen. Tune in next week. But I just feel like so many people are down on the Rangers, and for obvious reasons. Like, if you're a Rangers fan, I feel your pain. Like, I live and breathe this team. I get it. Last season was really tough, but I think it's really difficult to look at this upcoming year as not a completely clean slate. There's so many teams, like Joe just mentioned, that have done almost nothing. And I'll try to pack this in because I feel like this could be a 15-minute monologue just talking crap about the Metro. But in short, the Kings are a great team. They're gonna probably win the division. I think the Capitals, like you said, they were unbelievable last year, so it would be very believable that they had a little bit of a down spurt, especially considering that Ovi's not chasing the record and their goaltending to me is a huge question mark. I agree with Joe completely that the Devils didn't do anything to improve the team whatsoever, and I think that everyone is just full stock into this team being healthy for once for a full season. Meanwhile, Jack Hughes has never played 82 games in his life, and I just don't see it happening. So at some point, they're going to run into this blockade of like, hey, we really should have done something last offseason. And I would see them overspending at the deadline, if I'm honest with you. I think that the Rangers have easily the best goaltender in the division, period. I think the Penguins are definitely at the bottom. I mean, people forget the fact that we scored more goals than the Panthers last season. We scored more goals than the Devils did, including the playoffs. And it's so easy to factor them out based off of last season. But you add in the new defensive combination, the new coach, the best Metro goalie, like I mentioned. I don't see how this team doesn't make the playoffs. I said third. I wouldn't be surprised if they passed the Capitals and it went Canes, Rangers, Capitals. And I know that right now that sounds crazy, but I don't see teams like the Blue Jackets having quite the same magic. And I just feel like we were so close to making the playoffs, and there were so many teams that were so close to missing the playoffs. I mean, the Devils in any other division would have finished 5th, 6th, or 5th. So to me, I feel like, yes, it's mostly based on the fact that the Metro is like kind of a graveyard right now, but I don't see the Rangers missing the playoffs, and I would put a lot of money on it.
See, I feel like we're all kind of talking ourselves into it a little bit too. Like I was feeling pretty good about it, but listening to you guys, I feel even better. And I mean, I think you both touched on this a little bit, but the Rangers last season, in a year where everything went horrifically wrong, and it looked like certain players didn't even want to be there on certain nights. I mean, they got to fix that, obviously. That's step number one. But they still didn't miss the playoffs by that much. A year where everybody had a down season. So, with all that in mind and everything we just talked about, I do feel pretty good that this team will at least get back to the dance. And what happens at that point is anybody's guess. But it'll be a lot more fun to at least get in and be able to roll the dice a little bit this upcoming season. That's for sure. You
got to be in it to win it, John. I mean, once the playoffs start, I think it's anybody's ball game. And I think you look at this team and the expectation is going to be huge. But if they can get an early indication soon, like we hit the ground running, I think that confidence will bode well for the rest of the season. But, dude, always a pleasure to chat with you, man.
Yeah.
It's probably our turn to host soon, but we'd love to touch base with you again soon, and let's go Rangers.
Yeah, absolutely. And real quick, where can they find you guys? Broadway Block Podcast, and where can they find you guys on social media, the show, everything?
Available on all platforms, Spotify, Apple, at Broadway Block. We're really active, so reach out if you want to say let's go Rangers, or don't be shy. But thanks again, John.
John, thank you. Let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers, LGR. Let's go. All right. Have a good one, guys. And everybody, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.